during that time, I found that this woman is nothing short of a monster. And this is the exact dimensions of the box in which she was killed. And I wanted people to be able to see what that looked like, what Christina did to this child, placing this child in this box through fear and coercion. And that's the thing, it wasn't beatings, typically, that we would see bruises on. She put everybody in her life in fear. And she placed this child in a box out of fear. And then that child got into the box thinking that she'd get out, as she had so many other times before. But Christina was angry that day and placed blankets and a crib and a number of other things on there to reduce the airflow and increase the heat.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala.
And I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. That was Rose Hill Police Chief Taylor Parlier sharing a disturbingly visual image of what happened to the victim in the child buried in the backyard case out of Kansas. 6-year-old Kennedy Schroer, whose biological name was Natalie Marie Garcia, disappeared in September of last year. Now, after an investigation into her adoptive parents, investigators found the little girl's remains buried in the backyard. The investigation also revealed that Kennedy had likely been dead since November of 2020 and that she had been tortured and abused.
Christina and Joseph Schroer were both charged in the case. Now, he pleaded no contest to 2 counts of aggravated child endangerment. He'll be sentenced on December 3rd. Christina pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and child abuse and was in court yesterday for her sentencing. That's what we're going to bring you today. And right now, we're going to take you into court as the prosecutor lays out the details of this tragic, tragic case.
There's a young girl, Natalie Maria Garcia. She was born July 14th, 2014 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The little girl would be 11 now had she remained living. In August of 2017, Natalie Garcia and her 2 biological sisters were placed in foster care with Joseph and Christina Schroer. The Schroers, who were residents of Rose Hill, had a household that included biological, foster, and adopted children. In November of 2019, the Schroers adopted 5 girls, including Natalie and her sisters. Now, following that adoption, Christina removed the children from therapy. She removed them from in-person schooling. She cited concerns for an immunocompromised individual in the home. It's adult dependent. And as part of that adoption process, changed Natalie Garcia's name to Kennedy Schroer. So the name Kennedy Schroer sometimes is used interchangeably in this presentation, but Natalie was her birth name. Well, following that adoption, Your Honor, Christina Schroer established an environment of extreme control, isolation, abuse. It included things like surveillance within the home. There were multiple interior and exterior cameras that were installed in the home to alert Schroer of any movement, especially of the adopted children. She exhibited control and punishment over these kids. Even minor movements at night resulted in harsh punishments. The children were forced to lie motionless, confined in closets, dog crates, eventually locked in boxes or plastic storage containers. And then there was also the psychological manipulation that was evidence in this investigation. Schroer used intimidation, favoritism, deprivation to maintain obedience, and created a system where the children were pitted against one another, even for survival. Well, in this case, the investigation determined that Natalie was last seen alive on or around October 31st, Halloween of 2020, 5 years ago, and was subsequently murdered sometime thereafter, November 2020. And what happened that day was that Christina Schroer placed a 6-year-old Natalie in a reinforced cardboard box, and I want you to understand the dimensions of this, Judge, 16.5 inches by 14 inches by 12.5 inches for punishment, and that was for moving during the night. Schroer added heavy objects atop the box. It reduced airflow, raised temperature in that box. And then on top of that, Natalie's sister was then ordered to watch the box and report when she stopped moving. And that was the goal, was that Natalie or Kennedy was to be there motionless. When she did, Schroer ended up kicking the box caused Natalie's unresponsive body to fall out of that box. She later placed Natalie's body into her vehicle, drove her around for several hours. She reported that she was taken to the hospital, but she didn't. And then ultimately returned to the home and buried that child's remains in 2 trash bags in a shallow grave right outside of her master bedroom window. Now, immediately after the murder, Schroer fabricated a story that Natalie had attacked a sibling and was removed from the home for psychiatric treatment. That's what she told her husband. That's what she told a number of different people. This false narrative was repeated over and over to relatives, friends, authorities for years. Despite earlier reports of possible abuse, Schroer's manipulation and control led investigators and family members to believe her accounts. It was consistent. The absence of visible injuries and the children's fear prevented earlier discovery of this homicide. Because understand that the way that the control happened in the house wasn't bruises, cuts, etc. It was more psychological and deprivation based. So, following Natalie's death, Schroer's abuse of the remaining children in the home intensified between 2021 and 2024, including, again, the same confinement in boxes, closets, and tubs for extended periods. Physical beatings at this point, including beatings with hands and objects, were reported by siblings. Suspension by the wrists, stabbing with sharp instruments has been outlined by some of the victims. Food deprivation, including moldy or contaminated meals. Psychological abuse, including manipulation, enforced isolation, the use of fear-based control. These were the tools that Christina Schroer utilized. The children's health deteriorated severely. The weight for age measurements on these kids fell from normal ranges in about the 75th percentile to below the 5th percentile by 2024. Schroer further fostered distrust and conflict among the children by rewarding betrayal, punishing loyalty. And this wasn't where it stopped. Understand there's a financial component to this as well. Christina Schroer exploited the foster and adoption system for financial gain. She fabricated medical and behavioral conditions such as aggression, self-harm, developmental disorders to increase, first of all, the state subsidies for her care, for child care. And these same false claims have been made regarding previous foster placements. So once those numbers are inflated and the adoptions finalized and the subsidies ceased, Schroer ended the children's medical and therapeutic care. So the investigators determined that Schroer oversaw multiple income sources, including military retirement, disability payments from her spouse, foster and adoption stipends or payments that she got from the state, SSI for the adult dependent that lives in her home, and then there were online sales and baking income that she refers to in her PSI statement, actually. And when we looked at the financial records here, we saw that just in one casino, that Schroer had lost over $4 million in the process to one casino and online gambling. That was offset by about $1 million worth of winnings. But all of these monies went towards supporting a gambling habit, amongst other things. So the homicide came to light in 2024 after Schroer attempted to preemptively control the narrative a little bit more and amid growing suspicion. Investigators recovered Natalie's remains buried on the property. We came across this, and the investigation really, at that point, fully was underway. And what did the investigation result in? We saw systemic failures in recognizing prolonged abuse. We saw manipulation within a closed household, tightly controlled closed household. The deceptive environment that Schroer created allowed her to conceal severe abuse and homicide for nearly 4 years. And so we're here today for sentencing, and while this, the sentence that you'll impose here today can't restore Natalie's life, it can't undo the suffering inflicted on her siblings, it does at least ensure Christina Schroer will remain confined and unable to harm others, specifically children. The surviving children are now under care. They're beginning their recovery process. That has been an uphill battle, to say the least. And I don't think for the purposes of today's sentencing that the details of that have been fleshed out, but or will be, but that's still a work in progress very much, Your Honor, as you can understand. The investigators communicated with me on a number of occasions the importance of vigilance and reporting, review of abuse claims, especially in cases where caregivers exert high levels of control and isolation. We need more oversight. And so, Judge, kind of in conclusion of my statements here today, the homicide of Natalie Marie Garcia, or Kennedy Schroer, as she was also known, represents, to me, a profound tragedy of abuse and manipulation. Christina Schroer's actions in particular were motivated by control, financial gain, and more than anything, cruelty. It led to the death of a 6-year-old child, a little girl, years of suffering of others that were in her care. And while our efforts to achieve justice in this case can't erase this pain, the case does underscore, as I said, the need for stronger oversight of foster and adoptive systems, heightened awareness of coercive, isolating family environments, such as what the Schroer home was in Rose Hill for a number of years. Thankfully, Natalie's surviving siblings are free to heal, and they're on their path. And their abuser is going to spend the next several years confined, living in what I would refer to as a box of her own design. Her food will be controlled. She will be restricted from where she can go. Your Honor,
Were these child needed care cases involving these young girls handled through your office and the court system here or in another county or community?
the original was, no, it was handled elsewhere. Since this investigation began, we've had active cases with regard to the siblings that were in the home.
We will come back to that sentencing, a horribly tragic case. I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later on in the show. Before we take a break, though, we want to turn our attention to New York, where we just learned new details about Diddy's life behind bars. According to prison documents, Sean Combs is spending his early prison days working in the chapel and enrolled in an intensive drug treatment program. That program could shorten his sentence by up to 1 year.
But we'll see how that turns out, because he also found himself facing disciplinary action for an unauthorized phone call just days after being transferred to a federal prison in New Jersey. As a result, he may temporarily lose his phone and commissary privileges. Combs was moved to the Fort Dix prison on October 30th after being sentenced to more than 4 years on prostitution-related charges.
All right. He also allegedly made homemade wine in jail, even though he'd said in court he was clean and not drinking.
He was sober. So again, as I said, we'll see if he'll get that early release.
Agree with you.
Stay out of trouble.
Right. We need to take that break now. Up next, the victim's family, including her biological mother, make emotional impact statements, and we hear from the defendant herself, and who admits to wrongdoing, and she also tries to clear her husband's name.
Oh, so the man accused of killing 4 people in Tennessee and kidnapping 2 of the victim's infant daughters is indicted. We'll have details ahead when Court TV Live returns.
Mama tried. Now my daddy's crying because I'm in here.
You are the common denominator that led to JD and Big Doug shooting each other in the dark of night.
I ain't help right now, I'm dying.
Don't you have the blood of both these men on your hands?
I feel guilty for that.
You felt guilty because, frankly, you were guilty.
Interview with a Killer. New episode Saturday night at 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
Folks, before we get you back to court, here are a few of the cases that we're tracking here now at Court TV. First in Tennessee, Austin Drummond, the man accused of killing 4 people, has been indicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder. Drummond was arrested in August after a week-long manhunt for the killer of the parents, grandmother, and teenage uncle of a baby found abandoned in a stranger's yard.
In Wisconsin, Matt Paul is set to be sentenced today after a jury convicted him of murdering his longtime girlfriend, Stephanie Pavlons, whose body was found decomposing in the woods. He faces a mandatory sentence of life behind bars.
And in Florida, opening statements are expected tomorrow in the troubled orphan murder trial. Dima Tower faces a potential life sentence if he's convicted of brutally murdering his adoptive parents.
All right, let's get you back to Kansas for sentencing in the child buried in the backyard case. Right now, we are hearing emotional impact statements from the victim's family, including the victim's biological mother.
And then after that, the defendant addresses the court and says that her husband had nothing to do with what happened.
I am Haley Wilson. I'm Natalie's sister, or Kennedy's sister. I'm 15 years old. I'm her oldest sister. And this case has really made a big impact on my life. As a sister and as a minor, I can confidently admit I know my right from wrong, and I know what happened to my sister is beyond wrong. This affects me and my family in so many different ways. For the past year, everything has been really strange, and my eyes and my heart get really heavy, as well as my mom's. I can't sleep that well at night because all I can think about is Natalie, and I know she does not deserve this. How could somebody do this to my sister? I will never get a true answer, although I really hope to follow her strength and follow her and see her again. That is all I have.
Thank you.
I'm Cinnamon Alton. I am Natalie's grandmother. This is Kristen. She's the mother, biological mother. Her birth name was Natalie Marie Garcia. She was a beautiful, funny, lovable, silly, caring little girl. You have to meet.
She was a good girl who just needed love. She was so much fun to be around, and her infectious smile could light up an entire room. She was born on July 14th, 2014. She was my 3rd daughter. Natalie was a great big and little sister. The fact that she's gone and I'll never see her again, I ask God, why her? Why not me? I stand here today to make sure her voice isn't silenced, that her life and the way it was taken is not forgotten. I ask the court to remember this is about a baby girl who was loved beyond measure. I am pleading for the max sentence, justice for Natalie. May God rest her soul. Thank you.
I ask for the court to give her the max on every charge that she has. Natalie didn't get to experience things that she should have. She was robbed. And she's not so mean right now. You know?
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, for your strength.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Shore, please stand. Is there anything that you would like to say to the court before I impose your sentence today that you bargained for in this case?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to apologize to my family, my friends, and the community I love for any heartache this has caused them. I would also like to apologize to my husband, Joseph Shore, especially, who had absolutely no acknowledgement of this, knew nothing about this, and has been charged in this case as well. He knew nothing, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Well, that was hard to listen to. I really don't want to hear anything she has to say. I know this is sentencing and she could speak, Michael, but I'm just not impressed.
Yeah, and the fact that claiming that the husband knew nothing about it. It was either very willful, which is just as bad, or he knew and she's trying to cover for it.
Either one is bad. Let's bring in, to discuss this, our guest this hour, criminal defense attorney Dwayne Cates. I've got to speak with you, Dwayne, otherwise I'll go on and on, because this is an area of law I've practiced for a long time, and the reality is, once adopted, there's no oversight. However, there were so many systemic failures with doing anything about the chronic abuse and then the murder of this beautiful young child. Tell us your thoughts, please.
You know, the system obviously failed, but the system's got to walk a fine line, because sometimes they falsely accuse people of abusing their children that aren't abusing their children, and sometimes they don't catch the abuse and tragedies happen. So there's always problems on both sides of it, but there's got to be some way to put something in place so that they can monitor these children that are foster children and then are adopted. Because, you know, they're at risk. I mean, you know, in almost every case, there's some risk. You know, there are a lot of great adoptive parents out there, but there are also some bad ones. And they got to put a system in place to kind of weed that out.
Yeah, you know, it's the thing that jumps out to me, and I want to pose this to both of you because I do know of your experience in this area. The idea that the abuse in this case was emotional and psychological, which makes it more difficult. I can understand that, right? And the idea is that it takes a village, right? This little girl was supposedly killed in 2020, and her body was found in 2024. For 4 years, the community was asking questions, but just figured, hey, whatever explanation she was giving, she was often some psychological, a little child. And no one stepped up to seek help for the child or say, look, something's odd about what's going on in that house. And I want to begin with you, Judge, in terms of the responsibility of the community in a situation like this.
You know, I preach, see something, say something. People are afraid. People don't want to get involved. People think, oh, well, it's their child. I'm sure they're taking care of their child. We want to assume and trust that every child's being cared for. It's just not true. The community has to speak up.
Yeah, Dwayne?
Well, you know, the fact that she isolated these children from the outside world, I mean, that they didn't go to school, they were homeschooled, you know, everything was, and that she stopped all the psychological services. So there was nobody for these children to tell what was going on. She made sure of that. And then she used the psychological abuse and the threats and coercion to guarantee that they stayed silent. And that's how she got away with this for so long. That's how a child could go missing for 4 years and nobody noticed.
It's crazy. It should never happen. It's crazy.
One of the interesting things when I read the statement put out by the police was that according to people who knew the girls, the other girls, they were all well-adjusted and all well-mannered, which I found interesting because sometimes when you're in a difficult situation at home, that's not the case. So somehow she was able to balance what was going on in the home, getting these girls out into the world in a way that didn't make it suspicious.
But I think that's psychological manipulation. Talk about emotional abuse. They know this is happening to their sister, and yet they're well-behaved in public. That's called emotional abuse. The mother's manipulated all of this, in my opinion.
Fair enough. All right, we're going to step aside here. Dwayne, stand by. We're going to take a break. Coming up next, the judge begins her sentencing.
Plus, detectives reveal details of the defendant's police interrogation in the love triangle beheading trial of Devin Michaels.
She says, Mommy, here's Dad's cell phone. That's why he didn't answer. There was a physical reaction from this, from Devin, and she takes the phone, she hands it to us, and she made a comment, this should help you. And then that's pretty much changed the tone a little bit to casual conversations to then it became a little bit more flustered.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott.
And I'm Michael Ayala. We are bringing you the tragic case of a 6-year-old. Her name is Kennedy Schroer. Now, her remains were found buried in the backyard of her adoptive parents' home in September of last year. But investigators say the little girl had likely been dead for 4 years.
Her adoptive parents, Christina and Joseph Schroer, pled no contest to the charges. Joseph will be sentenced next month. Now, yesterday, Christina was in court, and the judge had stern words for her as she began handing down her sentence. Let's listen in.
The damage and the harm that you've caused in this case is beyond measure. The trust that was placed in you by the state of Kansas, by the community, to guard, protect, and love the most vulnerable of our population, which are children who are in need, who are in foster care. That's what you agreed to do. That's what you committed to, was to take care of them, love them, guide them. Because of their circumstances, they needed that special attention. But instead, you know, the attention that you got, the things that you did, destroyed them emotionally, mentally, and Kennedy physically. You truly treated them as if they were animals, less than most animals get treated. And you took money that was given to you, entrusted to you, to take care of the children. You betrayed everyone. You betrayed your family. You betrayed her family, her people. And you betrayed the community in which you lived in Rose Hill, Kansas, that you were fostering children, and you adopted children, and you were apparently seen as someone who was a caretaker. Everyone involved in this case would like to have answers. There's no explanation. There is no answer. There is no logic. There is no reason why this should ever happen. It's unfortunate that this system that's in place has resulted in a death. And it's certainly not the first time. One would have thought after Adam Herman and the other cases throughout the state, and I'm sure throughout the country, that better mechanisms would be in place to identify or flag people who take children, not out of the kindness of their heart or the love in their heart, but people who really are evildoers and abusers of children, which is what you are. For the crime of Kennedy, Natalie Marie, I have no difficulty imposing the aggravated sentence in this case, which is 165 months with the Department of Corrections, as established by the Kansas Sentencing Guidelines, the legislature, and as amended and charged in this case. It is a level 1 person felony. It grants you an opportunity to earn up to 15% good time credit. And it is a determinate sentence that minus your jail credit and any good time credit that you may or may not earn in the Department of Corrections as established by them, you will definitively serve. So your post-release supervision, sometimes referred to as parole, but you won't have an opportunity for parole because this is a determinate sentence. But that supervision period will be 36 months and require you to register as a violent offender and under the abuse registry with the state of Kansas. The violent offender public registration is for a period of 15 years post-release from post-release supervision. So you serve your sentence. You serve 36 months on post-release supervision, and then you begin your 15-year registration requirements. Obviously, I'm going to order in this case that you have no contact with any minor children. None.
We are going to put a pin in that and come back to more of the judge's sentencing. But before we go to break, we want to keep you updated on a major trial that Court TV has been covering.
Day 5 of the love triangle beheading trial of Devin Michaels gets underway tomorrow. She's accused of killing and beheading her ex-boyfriend and father of her children, Jonathan Willett, back in August of 2023. Now, Willett was in the process of moving in with Michaels and their 2 daughters when he was killed.
Michaels was also married at the time to Willett's son from a previous relationship, Davier Willett. Now, the defense claims Davier is the one who killed his father because he was afraid that if his dad moved in, he would lose the defendant Michaels, his wife, and their home. But Davier testified last week that he had nothing to do with the murder. On Monday, the jury listened to more of Michaels' police interrogation as investigators pressed her about what happened to Jonathan and about his bloody phone being found at her home.
So what was your reason for getting married to Davier?
Because legally, as my spouse, he has more rights and access to things than someone just as a random.
So like pick up prescriptions and other
He can do anything as my spouse. He actually, I had to go into the hospital in the ambulance, and he was the one that took care of all of that.
Okay, so are you guys like intimate together?
No.
Does he sleep in your room?
Sometimes, like he'll fall asleep when we watch TV, but he usually sleeps on the couch.
He was gonna have to move out?
Davier was not happy about it, and the idea was John was not supposed to be moving in.
Testimony set to resume tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll bring it to you as it happens right here on Court TV Live.
Let's take that break now. When Court TV Live continues, the judge is not done just yet with her sentencing in the child buried in the backyard case. We will have that.
But first, the judge had these comforting words for the victim's family.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry for your loss. I am sincerely sorry for the loss that you've suffered. I wish peace for all of you.
A former porn actor caught in a deadly father-son love triangle.
I'm not going to stop fighting to prove my innocence.
The Love Triangle beheading trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Sunday nights on Court TV. Join us for a night of food, friends, and our favorite legal dramas. It's Order in the Court. And this week, we're binge watching Bull. Sundays on Court TV.
Welcome back. We are wrapping up our coverage in the sentencing hearing for Christina Schroeder in the child buried in the backyard case out of Kansas.
All right, let's head back to court now. The judge is sentencing the defendant on other charges as well.
For the second count, count 2, abuse of a child, knowingly torturing or cruelly inflicting punishment to a child. I am imposing the maximum sentence that I can give you, which is the aggravated sentence of 34 months with the Department of Corrections. These are separate and distinct offenses, and I am going to run this consecutive to the second-degree murder sentence of 165 months. On count 5, making a false writing to procure monies. Welfare fraud. I am imposing the maximum sentence that I can give you for criminal history score of I, which is, in your case, no prior criminal history, of 9 months with the Department of Corrections. That is a level 8 non-person felony that you are being sentenced for. The primary base offense of murder controls your sentence today, but I will note for purposes of the PSI, the post-release duration on an abuse of a child is 24 months, and on making a false writing, it's 12 months. As they run consecutive, perhaps the good time credit matters as you complete the murder charge and sentence that you've received by the court. Then you will serve the sentence on the abuse of a child that's ran consecutive by this court, and then you will serve the 9 months aggravated sentence on the false writing with what turns into the possibility of 20% good time credit if you earn it, if it's earned. Again, that's within the exclusive control of the Department of Corrections, Kansas Department of Corrections. Finally, on count 6, theft of property or services by deception, failing to report that Kennedy was no longer living, no longer in your care, and no longer in your custody, yet receiving benefits for her. I impose the aggravated sentence of 7 months with the Department of Corrections, consecutive to the other count on the level 9 non-person felony. It is 12 months of post-release supervision and 20% good time credit as documented in the pre-sentence investigation report. I've previously advised you under KSA 215403 and general registration provisions under 224906 of your duty to register for a period of 15 years. But I am ordering that again today. The law requires that I give you jail credit for the time that you've served in the county jail as your confinement from the date of your arrest on February 3rd of 2025 to today, which is 280 days jail credit that you're entitled to have credited against your sentence, which by my calculation is an aggravated sentence of 215 months with the Department of Corrections that you're ordered to serve. I'm also ordering that you make restitution. That is a judgment that will be against you. It's a civil judgment, and it's an order in your criminal case to be considered as part of your post-release supervision or any other manner or means in which the state wishes to collect this money back from you, which I believe is in the amount of $13,413.82. Also, pursuant to KSA 20-370, I'm ordering that you pay an assessment fee of $400 to the Children's Advocacy Center Fund in the state of Kansas through the clerk of the district court, as well as court costs in this matter. The court could find you on the theft charge, but the court has to assess your ability to pay as it relates to attorney's fees and bids fees and any other fees or costs associated with this case. Obviously, you will be confined and not be gainfully employed. And so the court is not adding on any additional fines other than the restitution. And again, that's consistent with the plea agreement in this case and the recommendations by the county attorney. With regard to attorney's fees, State of Kansas versus Robinson requires me to assess your ability to pay attorney's fees. Typically, that's associated with probation and someone that's gainfully employed. And so the court is required to waive those fees if I cannot make a finding that you're gainfully employed and capable of repaying the attorney's fees for the attorney that you were afforded in this case. He, of course, will be paid by the state of Kansas, but I cannot assess any costs against you with regard to that in my assessment and based on Supreme Court decisions and case law. And that will include the bids fee as well. I'm not aware of any other financial requests for the court to impose. Again, this case is much more than finances. This case is a tragedy. And you will be incarcerated and confined for the maximum period by law that I can give you today. I have imposed. You may be seated.
All right, so Judge, she was sentenced to 18 years total on a number of charges: a second-degree murder, aggravated abuse of a child, a couple of financial fraud situations, restitution as well for the money she stole from the state, and as far as the welfare fraud is concerned. We were both concerned that it didn't seem like enough, but the judge made clear, under the law, she sentenced her to the maximum that she could.
She did, and she found there were aggravating circumstances, so she even utilized the sentencing structure for that.
Absolutely, the consecutive sentences. Let's bring back in our guest. They're with us to discuss. Criminal defense attorney Dwayne Cates. Dwayne, want to get your reaction.
Well, you know, she sentenced her to the max that she could give her on every single count, and she ran them all consecutive. So there's nothing more she could have done to give her more. And by looking at the judge's face during the sentencing, I believe she would have given her more if she was able to.
Yeah, we were discussing whether or not she had tears. We had a person covering this who suggested that she was close to tears while she was delivering that sentence. But I have to ask you this, at the end of the day, yes, it's the max sentence. Is it enough? As she has available time for good time credit of 15%. Yes, she has to register with the abuse registry for years after she serves the sentence. But is it enough for somebody who did this to think that she's going to serve less than 17.9 years at the end of the day?
And you just don't know, okay? Because again, what she did was horrific. It really was horrific. But I argue all the time as a criminal defense attorney that sometimes by giving somebody an extra 10 years doesn't really do anybody any good. It's vindictive, okay? And again, she deserves punishment. And I believe that her life in prison, given what she did and the high-profile nature of this case, is not going to be easy. I don't think she's going to be one of the favorite inmates on the inside. I think she will be ostracized and possibly beat up. So she's going to have a pretty rough go of it. And again, it's all part of the plea bargaining process. You know, that's the plea they struck, and that they knew that this was going to be the outcome, and this was kind of chosen by everybody, so we kind of just have to live with it.
Yeah, it's the way the system works, and I would say generally it worked under these circumstances. Perhaps longer sentence would have made us feel better, but I agree with you. I think it worked. Quickly, the husband will be sentenced on December 3rd. He's got charges of aggravated child endangerment and some other charges as far as fraud is concerned. Do you find his culpability to be the same, or were you surprised when she was saying he didn't know anything about it?
She was trying to lessen the blow on him, and I believe that she was using the same techniques to manipulate him as she did to manipulate the children. I believe he bears some responsibility into this. This happened in his house under his roof. But I believe that she was so manipulative and such a narcissist that she was able to convince him that the child wasn't dead and that the child was in a psychiatric facility and all the other lies and all the other stuff that's going on. But he had to know what was going on with putting the children in boxes and the discipline techniques. Therefore, he deserves some punishment, and he'll get some.
Absolutely. And the manipulation by her is astounding. All right. Thank you so much, Dwayne Cates, for being with us today.